She crossed an ocean for a promise and new life with a man she'd only met in letters. She was supposed to be a bride building a home in a quiet Montana town. But the promise was a lie, and the home was swallowed by a flood. Abandoned by the man she was meant to marry, left to die in the rising water, her story should have ended there. But in the heart of the storm, a different man appeared, a battle-scarred ranger on a lone horse, a man who had seen the worst of humanity and thought he'd left it all behind. This isn't a fairy tale. This is the story of what happens when survival is the only vow that matters. The train ticket had cost Anna Petrova 4 months of her waitress salary, every meager tip and hoarded dollar tucked into a loose brick behind the greasy stove of the diner in her grey, crumbling Ukrainian city. The correspondence with Richard Blackwood had cost her the last vestiges of her hope in the familiar. He was her American dream, packaged in carefully worded emails and a single handsome photograph of a man with kind eyes and a confident smile leaning against a gleaming black truck with mountains in the background. His words promised a life she could poorly imagine. Havenwood, Montana is a paradise, Anna. Quiet, peaceful. I have a good business, a beautiful home waiting for you. You won't have to struggle anymore. You just have to come. Struggle was all Anna had ever known. At 22, her hands were already chapped and calloused, her back perpetually sore. She had her mother's tired eyes and a resilience forged in scarcity. The picture she'd sent him was 5 years old, taken at a cousin's wedding before life had scrubbed the youthful glow from her cheeks. She prayed he wouldn't be disappointed. As the train rattled through the final stretch of Montana wilderness, the sky outside began to weep. It started as a gentle patter against the thick glass of the observation car, a soft grey curtain drawn across the majestic peaks. But the rain grew insistent, angry. It hammered the roof, and the wind began to howl, a low, mournful sound that vibrated through the carriage. The pristine landscape blurred into a wash of green and brown. Richard Blackwood was waiting for her on the platform in Havenwood, just as he'd promised. He looked similar to his photo. Older, perhaps. The kind eyes had a nervous flicker, and the confident smile didn't quite reach them. The gleaming black truck was there, but up close she could see a spiderweb crack in the windshield and a dent in the passenger door. Anna. You made it, he said, his voice a little too loud, a little too hearty. He took her single battered suitcase and hustled her towards the truck, his hand on her back, feeling more like a push than a welcome. Heck of a storm to welcome you, eh? They're calling it a 100-year flood. Don't you worry, though. My place is on high ground. Snug as a bug. The drive through Havenwood was unsettling. The charming main street he'd described was a gauntlet of sandbags and boarded-up windows. The river visible at the end of the road was a churning brown monster spilling over its banks and creeping into the gutters, instead of a beautiful home on high ground. Richard drove them to the Havenwood Motor Lodge, a tired-looking 2-story building on the edge of town. The neon sign flickered erratically, casting a sickly pink glow on the rain-slicked asphalt. Just for a night or two, Richard explained, not meeting her eyes. My place is being fumigated. Bad luck with the timing, you know, the rain and all. Let's get you settled in. The room smelled of damp carpet and stale cigarette smoke. Anna placed her suitcase on the floor, her heart a cold, heavy stone in her chest. This wasn't right. Nothing was right. I'm hungry, she said, her voice small. Right, of course. Let's get some dinner at the diner next door. The best burgers in the county. He was trying too hard, his cheerfulness a flimsy dam against a rising tide of anxiety she could feel rolling off him. Over greasy burgers and lukewarm coffee, Richard talked. He talked about his import-export business, using vague terms and grand gestures. He talked about the people he knew, the deals he was closing. But when Anna asked specific questions where exactly his house was, what kind of things he imported, he would wave a hand dismissively. Boring details, honey. Let's talk about us. Our future. The lie was a living thing in the small booth sitting between them, growing fatter and more obvious with every word he spoke. Anna, who had spent her life deciphering the unspoken truths of desperate people, saw it clearly. The man across from her was not a successful businessman. He was a gambler, a pretender, and he was terrified. Not of the storm, but of something else entirely. He kept glancing at the door, his jaw tight. They returned to the motel room as the rain intensified. The lights flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. The wind shrieked, rattling the window in its frame. Outside, a new sound began the lapping of water. "It's just the parking lot," Richard said, his voice strained. "It'll drain away." But it didn't. Anna stood by the window, watching in horror as the brown water crept up from the asphalt, swallowing the tires of the black truck. A car alarm began to blare, a frantic, dying scream that was quickly choked into silence by the flood. I need to make a call," Richard stammered, fumbling for his phone. "Check on my warehouse." He stepped outside the room, onto the covered walkway of the second floor. Anna watched his silhouette as he paced back and forth, illuminated by the frantic flashes of lightning. He wasn't making a call. His phone was dark. He was watching the water rise, his posture screaming panic. The power had been out for an hour when the first floor of the motel went under. The sounds were terrifying, the groaning of submerged structures, the shattering of glass, the rushing torrent of a river that had forgotten its boundaries. The water was now swirling at the top of the stairs to their second-floor walkway. Richard burst back into the room, his face pale and slick with rain. He wasn't looking at her. He was grabbing his coat and a small duffel bag from the closet. "Where are you going?" Anna asked, her voice trembling. "I have to go. There's an emergency at the warehouse, a shipment. I have to save it." The lie was pathetic, absurd in the face of the apocalypse unfolding outside. "Richard, look at the water." "We can't go anywhere. You said we were safe." "I'll be back for you," he shouted, moving towards the door. "I promise, I know a back way out. Higher ground. I'll get help and I'll come back for you. Just stay here. Stay put." She grabbed his arm. "Don't leave me. Please, Richard. I don't know anyone. I have nowhere to go." Her carefully constructed composure finally shattered, and the terror she had been holding back flooded her voice. He ripped his arm from her grasp, his face twisting into a mask of raw, selfish fear she would never forget. The kind eyes from the photograph were gone, replaced by the cold, hard stare of a cornered animal. "You're on your own," he snarled. "You were always on your own. You were a mistake." He slammed the door behind him. Anna stumbled to the window, peering through the rain-streaked glass. She saw him clambering over the railing of the walkway, dropping into the churning, waist-deep water on the far side of the building, where the ground sloped upwards into the dark woods. He half waded, half swam, a desperate figure, swallowed by the storm. He never once looked back. Anna was alone in a dark motel room, in a strange country, in the middle of a historic flood. The water was now licking at the bottom of her door. The man who had promised her a new life had just left her core to die. The American dream was a flooded room at the end of the world. She sank to the floor, the sound of the raging water and the pounding of her own heart, the only two things left in existence. Caleb Cal Hayes didn't believe in heroes anymore. He'd seen them die for nothing in the dusty, sun-baked hell of Kandahar, their courage atomized by an IED or a sniper's bullet. He'd come home from the Army Rangers with a chest full of medals he kept in a shoebox, a leg full of shrapnel that ached with every drop in barometric pressure, and a silence in his soul that nothing seemed to fill. He'd bought a small isolated plot of land bordering the national forest miles outside of Havenwood, built a cabin with his own two hands, and cultivated an existence as quiet and unforgiving as the landscape around him. His only real companion was his horse, a powerful buckskin gelding named Ghost, whose steady presence was more comforting than any human conversation. The rain for Cal was a physical pain. It seeped into the old wounds in his leg and psyche, a dull, throbbing reminder of things best left buried. He'd watched the sky turn from bruised purple to a furious black for 2 days, had seen the creek on his property swell into a raging torrent. He knew what was happening down in the valley. He'd seen floods here before, but nothing like this. The old-timers called it a reckoning. Cal just called it a mess. He hadn't wanted to go into town. His instinct, honed by years of survival, was to hunker down, secure his own perimeter, and wait for the chaos to pass. But his former commander, a man he still respected, was now the county sheriff. The call had come over the satellite phone just before the lines went dead. "Cal, I know you're out there. We're overwhelmed. I've got people trapped. Just keep an eye on the north side of town if you can. Anyone you can get to high ground." It wasn't an order, but a plea. And duty, Cal had learned, was a ghost that haunted you long after you'd left the service. So he'd saddled Ghost. The horse was preternaturally calm in the storm, picking his way through the washed-out trails with a sure-footedness that shamed most men. They moved through the drowned edges of Havenwood like a spectre, a lone rider navigating a world that had come undone. The water was a greedy brown beast, filled with the debris of shattered lives, a child's teddy bear, a picket fence, splintered lumber from a collapsed barn. Cal's focus was grim, methodical. He scanned rooftops, second-story windows, any piece of high ground that might hold a survivor. He was about to turn back, convinced the area around the motor lodge was a lost cause, when he saw it. A flicker of movement in a second-floor window, a pale shape, a face. He urged Ghost forward, the horse grunting as his powerful legs pushed through the churning, chest-deep current. The Havenwood Motor Lodge was a wreck. The first floor had vanished completely, and the water was clawing at the second-floor walkway. He could hear the structure groaning, protesting the immense pressure. It wouldn't last much longer. He stopped Ghost beneath the window. "Hello," he yelled, his voice a gravelly bark against the roar of the flood. "Anyone in there?" The face appeared again, pressing against the glass. A woman. Young, terrified. Her eyes were wide, dark pools of shock in a face as white as bone china. She fumbled with the window, finally managing to slide it open a few inches. "Help me," she whispered, the sound almost stolen by the wind. "Please." Cal's jaw tightened. A civilian, a liability. But Sheriff Thompson's plea echoed in his mind. "Can you get to the door?" "It's stuck. The frame is warped from the water. The whole building is about to go." Cal stated not to scare her. but as a simple fact. We don't have time. You'll have to come through the window. Can you break it? He saw a flicker of resolve replace the terror in her eyes. She disappeared for a moment, then reappeared brandishing a metal floor lamp. With a desperate cry, she swung it against the glass. It starred but didn't break. She swung again and again, her grunts of effort audible even over the storm. On the fourth swing, the glass shattered, exploding outwards in a shower of glittering shards. "Okay," Cal commanded, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Listen to me carefully. Clear the glass from the bottom of the frame. I'm going to bring my horse as close as I can. You are going to swing your legs out and lower yourself onto his back behind me. Do you understand?" She nodded, her dark hair plastered to her face by the rain. She worked quickly, knocking the remaining teeth of glass from the frame with the base of the lamp. Cal maneuvered Ghost with expert precision, the horse standing like a rock in the maelstrom. The water surged around them, trying to pull them under. Now Cal yelled, "Come on!" She didn't hesitate. She swung one leg over, then the other, her cheap dress catching on a shard of glass and tearing with a sharp rip. For a terrifying second, she dangled there, her thin arms straining. Then she let go, dropping the few feet onto Ghost's back with a hard thump and a choked cry. She immediately clung to Cal, her arms wrapping around his waist like a vice, her face pressing into the wet, hard muscle of his back. She was trembling violently, not just from the cold, but from sheer bone-deep terror. Cal felt the fragile tremor of her body against his. It was an unwelcome intimacy. He was used to the solid weight of his pack, the familiar heft of a rifle, not the desperate, clinging weight of another human being. He gritted his teeth. "Hold on tight," he growled, and it was as much a warning to himself as it was to her. He turned Ghost, and together the three of them, the broken soldier, the abandoned woman, and the steady animal, began the slow, perilous journey away from the collapsing motel. As they moved, a section of the walkway finally gave way, plunging into the brown water with a great sucking roar. Anna flinched, her grip tightening until her knuckles were white. Cal didn't look back. He just stared forward into the grey, unforgiving curtain of the rain, his battle-scarred face a mask of grim determination. He had just put a stranger on his horse. He had just gotten involved, and as the cold Montana flood raged around them, Cal Hayes had the sickening feeling that the quiet life he had so carefully built for himself had just been washed away. The journey to Cal's cabin was a waking nightmare. Anna buried her face in the rough fabric of his jacket, trying to block out the terrifying landscape of the flood. The world had become a churning, primordial soup of water and debris. More than once, Ghost stumbled, and Anna's heart would leap into her throat, her grip on Cal becoming painfully tight. But the ranger never faltered. He was as taunt and immovable as the mountains, his low-voiced commands to the horse the only sound he made. He navigated by an internal compass, moving them steadily upward, away from the drowned valley, and into the dense, dripping forest. When they finally arrived, Anna could barely see the cabin through the thick veil of rain and encroaching twilight. It was small, made of dark, rough-hewn logs, with a stone chimney breathing a thin plume of white smoke into the grey air. It looked less like a home and more like a fortress, a place built to keep the world out. A lean-to on the side sheltered a stack of firewood that was taller than she was. Cal dismounted with a stiff, practiced motion. His landing was heavy, and Anna saw him favor his right leg for a fraction of a second. "Stay put," he grunted. He led Ghost under the lean-to, quickly unsaddling the horse and throwing a thick blanket over his back. He worked with an efficient, no-nonsense grace, murmuring a few soft words to the animal that were gentler than any he had offered her. Then he turned to her. "All right, your turn." Her body was a block of ice, her limbs stiff and unresponsive. When she tried to swing her leg over, her muscles screamed in protest, and she nearly fell. Cal was there in an instant, his hands surprisingly steady as they closed around her waist, lifting her down as if she weighed nothing. The moment her feet touched the muddy ground, her legs gave out. He caught her, his arm a steel band around her, preventing her from collapsing. "Easy," he said the word, a low rumble in his chest. He half-carried, half-dragged her to the cabin door, pushed it open, and guided her inside. The warmth of the interior was a physical shock. A fum blazed in a stone fireplace, casting flickering orange shadows across a single Spartan room. There was a bed in one corner, a small table with 2 chairs, and a kitchenette along the far wall. The place was meticulously clean and organized but starkly impersonal. There were no photographs, no decorations, no clutter. It was the home of a man who owned things for their function, not for sentiment. "Sit," he commanded, pointing to a chair by the fire. He disappeared into a small back room and returned with a thick wool blanket and a towel. He tossed them at her. "Get out of those wet clothes. All of them. Wrap yourself in the blanket. If you get hypothermia out here, you'll die. Understand?" He turned his back to her, busying himself at the counter, giving her a semblance of privacy. Anna fumbled with the buttons of her torn, soaked dress, her fingers numb and clumsy. She peeled off the sodden layers of clothing until she was standing naked and shivering in the firelight. The shame she expected to feel was absent, burned away by the cold and the sheer terror of the last few hours. She quickly dried herself with the rough towel and wrapped the heavy, scratchy blanket around her shoulders. It smelled of wood smoke and something else, something clean and masculine that was uniquely Cal. "Done," she whispered. He turned around, his gaze clinical as he assessed her. He was holding 2 mugs of what she now realized was steaming coffee. He handed one to her, his fingers brushing hers. His hand was warm and rough with calluses. "Drink it." Slowly. He took the other chair, the firelight catching the sharp angles of his face. For the first time, she could truly see him. He was younger than she'd first thought, maybe in his early 30s, but his eyes were ancient. His brown hair was cut short, military style, and a jagged white scar cut through his left eyebrow, giving him a permanent look of fierce concentration. He held his mug in both hands, staring into the flames, the silence stretching between them. Anna took a sip of the coffee. It was black and brutally strong, but the warmth spread through her chest, a welcome invasion. "Thank you," she said, her voice hoarse. You saved my life." He gave a slight, almost imperceptible shrug. Anyone would have. Anna knew that wasn't true. Richard wouldn't have. Most people would have hidden just as he did. "My name is Anna," she offered into the silence. He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Cal." He offered nothing more. He seemed determined to remain a mystery, a stoic rescuer who wanted nothing more than for the rescue to be over. But Anna needed to talk. She needed to purge the poison of Richard's betrayal to make the nightmare real by giving it words. "I was supposed to get married," she said, the words spilling out in a rush. "To a man named Richard Blackwood. He brought me here. He said he had a house, a business. It was all a lie. He left me. He left me in that room to die. Cal's gaze remained fixed on the fire. He didn't seem surprised or shocked. He just listened, his silence a stark contrast to Richard's empty promises. He said he was coming back for me. She continued, the bitter laugh catching in her throat. I knew he was lying. I knew it the moment I met him. But I wanted to believe. I came all the way from Ukraine for his lies. At the mention of Ukraine, Cal's head turned slightly. A flicker of something, not pity, maybe recognition, crossed his face. Long way from home. I have no home, she said, the finality of the words hitting her with the force of a physical blow. Tears she hadn't even realized she was holding back began to well in her eyes, hot and shameful. She looked down into her mug, trying to hide them. Cal said nothing for a long time. The only sounds were the crackling of the fire and the relentless drumming of the rain on the roof. Anna thought he was going to ignore her breakdown, let her drown in her own misery. But then he stood up, his movements stiff. He walked to a wooden chest at the foot of his bed and opened it. He pulled out a faded grey t-shirt and a pair of thick wool socks. He walked back and placed them on the table beside her. These will be dry, he said gruffly. You can sleep here by the fire. I'll take the floor. The storm's not letting up. You're stuck here for now. It wasn't an act of kindness, not in the soft, comforting way she was used to. It was a statement of fact, a logistical arrangement. He was a man who dealt in practicalities, not emotions. Yet as Anna looked at the simple offering of a dry t-shirt and socks, it felt like the most profound gesture of humanity she had experienced in a very long time. She was a stranger, a burden he had been forced to take on. He didn't know her, didn't trust her, and probably didn't even like her. But he hadn't left her to die. In his stark, silent cabin, surrounded by a world of water, that simple fact was the only thing she had to hold on to. She was a mail-order bride without a groom, a foreigner without a visa, a survivor without a plan. And her life, for now, was in the hands of a scarred and silent stranger who seemed just as trapped by his past as she was by her present. For 2 days, the cabin was their entire world. The rain slowly softened from a percussive roar to a steady hissing drizzle, but the water levels remained dangerously high, rendering any thought of leaving impossible. A strange, unspoken routine formed between them. Cal would venture out at dawn and dusk to tend to Ghost and check the perimeter of his property, returning each time covered in a fresh sheen of rain. Anna would keep the fire fed her movements small and quiet, terrified of disturbing the fragile peace. They ate meals of canned stew and hardtack biscuits in near complete silence. The quiet was different from the empty silence of her lonely apartment back home. This silence was heavy occupied. It was filled with the things Cal wasn't saying, with the ghosts of the man he used to be. Anna found herself watching him when he wasn't looking. She saw the way his hand would sometimes drift to his right leg, his knuckles white as he massaged a phantom pain. She saw the tension in his shoulders when a log in the fire would pop too loudly, a sound like distant gunfire. He was a man braced for impact, even in the safety of his own home. Anna wore his grey t-shirt, which hung on her like a dress, and the thick wool socks. The clothes were a constant, strange reminder of his presence. She washed her own torn dress in a basin of water and hung it near the fire to dry a sad relic of a life that had ended only 3 days ago. On the 3rd morning, they woke to a profound change. The relentless drumming on the roof had stopped. A watery grey light filtered through the cabin's single window. The storm had finally broken. "The water will start to recede." Cal said his first unsolicited words of the day. "It'll be a few more days before the roads are passable, if they're even there." He spent the morning outside, clearing debris from a culvert that channeled water away from his cabin. Anna watched him from the doorway, the air thick with the smell of wet earth and pine. He worked with a relentless, punishing rhythm as if he were at war with the landscape. Later that afternoon, he announced, "I'm going to head down towards the edge of town. See what the main road looks like. Stay here. Lock the door behind me." "Can I come?" The words were out before she could stop them. The thought of being left alone again, even in this safe place, sent a spike of panic through her. Cal stopped and looked at her, his expression considering. "It's a mess. The ground is unstable. I won't slow you down," she said, her voice pleading. "Please, I can't stay here alone." He stared at her for a long moment, his gaze intense. She thought he would refuse, but he gave a curt nod. "Fine. But you do exactly what I say when I say it. No arguments." He found a pair of old, worn work boots for her that were 2 sizes too big, which she stuffed with spare rags. The journey down the mountain was treacherous. The familiar trail was gone, replaced by a slick, treacherous morass of mud and tangled roots. Cal moved with a ranger's certainty, pointing out loose soil and slick rocks, his hand occasionally shooting out to steady her when she slipped. The devastation at the bottom of the valley was absolute. The world was coated in a thick, foul-smelling layer of brown sludge. Houses were torn from their foundations. Cars were overturned and filled with mud, and the landscape was littered with the intimate belongings of Havenwood's residents. They reached the remains of the main road, which was fractured and washed out in several places. Near the spot where the Havenwood Motor Lodge had once stood, something caught Cal's eye. It was Richard's black truck wedged sideways against a cluster of sturdy pine trees, half submerged in mud. "That's his truck," Anna whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. Cal's eyes narrowed. He was a hunter, a tracker. He didn't just see a truck. He saw a story. "Stay here," he ordered. He approached the vehicle cautiously, his boots sinking deep into the mud. The driver's side door was ajar. He peered inside his face, grim. He reached in, pulling out a sodden leather wallet from the glove compartment. He trudged back to Anna, flipping it open. Inside was a driver's license. The picture was of the man Anna knew as Richard Blackwood. But the name on the license was not Richard Blackwood. It was Robert Miller. Robert Miller. Anna read, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Who is that?" "The man who left you at the motel." Cal said, his voice flat. He continued to rifle through the wallet. There were a few dollars, a credit card, also under the name Robert Miller, and a folded laminated card. It was a library card from a town 3 states away. There was nothing, no identification, no mail, no piece of paper that said Richard Blackwood. He lied. Anna breathed, the realization dawning on her. He even lied about his name. Cal was no longer looking at the wallet. His gaze was fixed on the ground near the truck. He knelt his fingers, tracing something in the mud. Footprints. One set leading away from the truck, heading not towards the woods where Anna had seen him flee, but back towards the highway. They were deep, frantic prints. But there was another set of tracks, fresher, overlaid on the first. 2 men. Heavy boots. They had come after the floodwaters had started to go down. They had come looking for the truck. "We're going back," Cal said abruptly, his voice tight with a new urgency. "Now." "What is it? What did you find?" "Someone else was here," he said, pulling her along. "They were looking for your Richard." As they scrambled back up the path to the cabin, Cal's demeanor had changed. The quiet observer was gone, replaced by the soldier. His head was on a swivel, his eyes scanning the woods around them. "This man, Robert Miller." Cal asked, his voice low and intense. "What did he tell you about his business?" "Exactly." "He said import-export." He was vague. He talked about a big deal, something he was finalizing. He seemed nervous, scared. Even before the storm got bad. Scared of what I don't know. I thought it was just because his lies were catching up to him. It was more than that. Cal said, his jaw set. A man like that, a small-time con artist using a fake name to impress a woman from overseas, he doesn't just get left alone. He pissed someone off. Someone with resources. Someone who sends men in heavy boots to track him down in the middle of a disaster zone. They reached the cabin, and the first thing Cal did was bolt the door. He went to the window, peering out not at the receding flood, but at the tree line. The danger, Anna realized with a sickening lurch in her stomach, had not been the water. The water had just been a smoke screen. The real storm, the one Robert Miller was running from, was still out there. And by leaving her behind, he had inadvertently placed her right in the middle of it. The seeds of suspicion had taken root, and Anna had a terrifying feeling that they were about to bear violent, deadly fruit. The revelation that Richard was Robert Miller and that unknown men were searching for him changed the atmosphere in the cabin from one of fragile sanctuary to a tense fortress. The silence that had once been filled with unspoken trauma was now charged with imminent threat. Cal was no longer just a recluse. He was a sentry. He cleaned and oiled a hunting rifle with a chilling efficiency that spoke of long and intimate familiarity. He placed a heavy axe by the door and a hunting knife on the small table between their chairs. "If I tell you to hide, you go to the root cellar," he instructed, his voice low and devoid of emotion. He pointed to a trapdoor hidden beneath a bearskin rug. "Don't come out. Not for any reason. Not even if you hear me call your name. You only come out if I come down there myself." "Got it." Anna nodded, her throat too tight to speak. This was the language of survival, a dialect he was fluent in, and she was just beginning to learn. The world of waitress tips and romantic dreams felt like it belonged to another person in another lifetime. For a full day, they waited. Every snap of a twig outside, every cry of a bird sent a jolt of adrenaline through Anna. Cal seemed to exist in a state of heightened awareness. His body relaxed, but his eyes constantly moving, scanning the perimeter through the windows. He was a predator waiting to be hunted. The attack, when it came, was not from the shadowy men in boots, but from the ghost they were all expecting. It happened near dusk. The grey light was failing, turning the woods into a tapestry of deep, menacing shadows. Anna was washing their tin plates at the sink when a sudden frantic rattling at the door made her drop one with a clatter. "Anna. Anna, it's me. Let me in." The voice was instantly recognizable. It was Richard. Or Robert. Cal was on his feet in a silent flash, the rifle in his hands, its barrel pointed at the door. He motioned furiously for Anna to move away, to get to the cellar. "Anna, please, I'm hurt. They're after me." The voice was a desperate, wheezing sob. Anna froze, her feet rooted to the floor. Part of her, the foolish, hopeful part that had crossed an ocean, felt a pang of pity. Another harder part, The part that remembered his face as he'd abandoned her felt nothing but cold fury. "Stay back," Cal mouthed silently, his eyes burning with intensity. "Go away, Richard." Anna found her voice shouting at the door. "Or Robert, or whoever you are. They're going to kill me, Anna. There's something in the room. In our room, at the motel. I have to get it back. Please, you have to help me." A loud crash from outside made them both jump. It sounded like a man falling, followed by a string of curses. Cal moved to the window, peeking through a tiny gap in the curtain. His body went rigid. "Get down," he hissed. He didn't need to say it twice. Anna dropped behind the heavy wooden table, her heart hammering against her ribs. "He's not alone," Cal whispered, backing away from the window. "The other two are with him. They're using him as bait." The strategy was suddenly horribly clear. They wanted whoever was inside the cabin to open the door for the pathetic, pleading man, and then they would rush the building. "Anna, for God's sake," Robert's voice was weaker now, closer to the door. "It's a laptop, in the vent. I hid it in the heating vent. It has everything on it. It's my only leverage. If they get it, I'm dead." A new voice, cold and sharp, cut through the air from outside. "Enough games, Miller. Tell your friend in the cabin to open the door, or we'll start taking pieces off you." A pained scream from Robert confirmed the threat was real. Cal's face was a mask of cold fury. He was a soldier again, his mind working through tactics and probabilities. He was defending his home, his sanctuary. And Anna, whether he liked it or not, was under his protection. "They think it's just you and him," Cal whispered to Anna, his mind racing. "They don't know about me." He crept to the back of the cabin, to a small shuttered window that looked out towards the woodshed. He opened it a crack. The two men were visible, hulking shapes in the twilight. They were focused on the front of the cabin, using Robert as their pawn. One of them held Robert by the collar, a glint of steel at his throat. Cal made a decision. He looked at Anna, his eyes locking with hers. He gave her a single sharp nod towards the trapdoor. This time, she didn't hesitate. She scrambled over, lifted the heavy door, and slipped into the cool, damp darkness of the cellar, pulling the door closed over her head. The cellar smelled of earth and potatoes. She was plunged into near total darkness. Her only light, a thin sliver coming through the cracks in the floorboards above. She could hear everything, the floorboards creaking as Cal moved, the desperate pleas from Robert, the menacing threats of the other men. Then a new sound, the shattering of the back window. Anna's blood ran cold. Cal hadn't stayed inside. He'd gone out. He was flanking them. What followed was a terrifying symphony of violence. A shout of surprise from one of the men. The sickening wet thud of the axe Cal had left by the door, striking something solid. A man's guttural cry of agony. The sharp crack of the rifle, deafeningly loud, followed by the sound of a body hitting the forest floor. Silence. Anna held her breath, her body trembling in the dark. It couldn't be over that quickly. She strained her ears, listening for Cal's voice, for any sign that he was all right. Instead, she heard a frantic scrabbling sound, and then Robert Miller's voice, no longer pleading, but filled with a triumphant, greedy hysteria. The drive. He said it was on a drive. Where is it? He was inside the cabin. The floorboards creaked directly above her head. He was frantically searching the room, tossing furniture, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Anna pressed herself against the cold stone wall of the cellar, making herself as small as possible. He had forgotten all about her. His only concern was finding the prize he'd come back for. Then she heard another sound. Cal's voice, low and dangerous from the doorway. Looking for something. Miller. A choked gasp from Robert. Hayes. I thought. They said they had you. They were wrong. Cal said, his voice laced with ice. Now get out of my house. Not without it. He has it. Thorne's man must have taken it off him. Robert shrieked, his voice cracking with madness. Everything's on it. All of Silas Thorne's accounts. He'll kill me. Suddenly, Anna understood. The laptop, the drive. It wasn't Robert's leverage. It was evidence. Evidence against a man named Silas Thorne. A man so dangerous that he'd sent a team of professionals to retrieve it during a natural disaster. Robert hadn't been running from a bad deal. He'd been running from a kingpin. The sound of a heavy blow echoed through the floorboards, followed by a groan and the thud of a body hitting the floor. Silence descended again, this time deeper, more final. Anna waited, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against the stillness. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Finally, she heard the trapdoor creak open. Light flooded the cellar. Cal's silhouette filled the opening. His face was grim. His knuckles were bloody, but he was standing. It's over, he said, his voice strained. You can come out. As Anna climbed out, shaking into the wrecked cabin, she saw Robert Miller lying unconscious on the floor. The immediate threat was neutralized. But as she looked at Cal and saw the grim understanding in his eyes, she knew it wasn't over at all. They had just stepped out of a flood and into a fire. They now knew the name of the man who wanted the evidence, and Silas Thorne was not a man who would give up easily. Cal tied Robert Miller to a chair with a length of rope, his knots swift and efficient. The con man was still unconscious, a dark bruise swelling on his jaw where Cal had hit him. The bodies of the two men he'd dispatched outside were now covered with tarps, grim monoliths in the dying light. The immediate chaotic violence was over, but a cold, calculated dread had taken its place. Silas Thorne. Cal said the name, tasting like poison in his mouth. He was pacing the small cabin, the suppressed energy of a caged wolf radiating from him. He's not some backwoods thug, Anna. He runs a massive logging operation out of Missoula, but that's just a front. Everyone knows it. No one can prove it. He's into smuggling, land fraud, money laundering, you name it. He's got half the politicians in the state in his pocket. He's ruthless, and he's smart. Anna looked at the pathetic figure of Robert Miller slumped in the chair. And this idiot stole from him. Worse. Cal surmised, his eyes hard. This idiot got his hands on proof. A laptop, a drive. Whatever it is, it must be the key to Thorne's entire illegal empire. Something that could put him away for life. That's why Thorne didn't just send hired guns. The men I took down. They were professionals, ex-military, most likely. Thorne is not messing around. A new terrifying thought dawned on Anna. The motel room. Robert said he hid it in the heating vent. If the room was destroyed in the flood. Cal stopped pacing and stared at the opposite wall, his mind working. The motel was on the north side. The river current would have pushed debris downstream to the east. But a heavy object like a laptop might not have traveled far. It could be buried in the mud somewhere near the foundation. His eyes met hers, and the unspoken reality passed between them. The evidence was likely still out there. and they were the only two people alive who knew where it might be. As if on cue, a low guttural sound echoed from the valley below. It was the rumble of a heavy engine, a sound that had no business being on the washed-out roads. Cal immediately doused the main lantern, plunging the cabin into the deep shadows of the firelight. He went to the window, peering cautiously into the darkness. Down on the valley floor, a pair of powerful headlights cut through the gloom. It was a massive military-grade truck, the kind with oversized tires capable of navigating the treacherous, muddy terrain. It was parking near the remains of the main road, its beams sweeping across the devastation like the eyes of a predator. "Thorn's here," Cal said, his voice a low growl. He sent his advance team, and when they didn't report back, he came himself. "He's not leaving without that drive." Panic, cold and sharp, seized Anna. "What do we do?" "He'll find the bodies. He'll know we're here." "He won't find them in the dark," Cal said, his mind already shifting from defense to offense. "But he'll find them at dawn. We can't stay here. This cabin is the first place he'll look." He was already moving, grabbing a canvas rucksack and stuffing it with supplies, a box of jerky, a small first aid kit, ammunition for the rifle, a water canteen. He was back in his element, a soldier preparing for a mission. "We have to move," he said. "Now. We have one advantage. I know this forest better than any man alive. He has technology and manpower. I have the terrain." He looked at Anna, his face grim in the flickering light. "This is your choice, Anna. I can go alone. I'll lead them on a chase, give you a chance to get away. Head south, find the authorities in another county, ones Thorn doesn't own." Anna looked from Cal's determined face to the unconscious form of Robert Miller, the man who had started it all. She thought of the cold motel room, the rising water, the utter hopelessness. She had been a victim then. She refused to be one now. Cal had saved her life. But somewhere in the terror of the last few days, she had found a core of steel within herself she never knew she possessed. Running felt like another kind of betrayal, this time to herself. "No," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I'm not running. What about the laptop? If it's as important as you say, we can't just leave it for him to find. It's the only thing that can stop him, isn't it?" A flicker of surprise, of something that might have been respect, showed in Cal's eyes. He hadn't expected that. Going for it would be suicide. "Thorn will have the entire area secured. You said he'd be searching for us at dawn." Anna pressed, her mind racing. "He'll be looking up here in the hills, not down there in the mud. He thinks the evidence is lost. He doesn't know that we know where to look. It's our only chance." Cal stared at her, truly seeing her for the first time, not as a frightened woman or a burden, but as a partner. Her logic was sound. It was a desperate, insane gamble, but it was the only move on the board that wasn't purely defensive. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. "All right, we do it your way. But the second it goes bad, we're out. No heroics." He glanced at Robert. "We can't take him with us, and we can't leave him here for Thorn to find. He knows who we are." The grim implication hung in the air. Cal walked over to Robert, checking his pulse. Still out cold. He looked around the cabin, then at the trap door to the root cellar. "He'll be safe enough down there for a few hours. Thorn's focus will be on us." Working together, they dragged the dead weight of Robert Miller's body and lowered him into the cellar, propping him against the damp stone wall. After Cal retrieved the rope, Anna gently closed the heavy door, shutting the man who had caused all this chaos into the darkness. Cal slung the rifle over one shoulder and the rucksack over the other. He handed Anna a small, heavy flashlight. "Keep it off unless I tell you. Stay directly behind me. Step where I step. Make no sound. We're ghosts now." He opened the cabin door and they slipped out into the cold, damp night. The air was thick with the smell of decay from the floodwaters. They didn't head down the path, but melted directly into the dense black woods behind the cabin, moving away from the prying headlights in the valley. The cat-and-mouse game had begun. They were no longer the rescued and the rescuer. They were two fugitives moving through the darkness, hunting for the one thing that could save them, while being hunted by a man who controlled everything else. The true danger had arrived, and they were walking right into its heart. Cal led Anna through the darkness using his knowledge of the forest to bypass Thorne's search party. They crouched at the edge of the woods, watching the men's flashlights sweep the hillside above. "They're looking in the wrong place," Cal whispered. "Now." They sprinted across the open, muddy ground where the motel once stood. As they frantically searched the wreckage, a spotlight erupted, pinning them in its blinding glare. Silas Thorne's amplified voice boomed across the valley. "Caleb Hayes, I believe you have something of mine." His men dragged a terrified Robert Miller into the light. "You have 5 minutes," Thorne declared, "or your friend dies." Just then, Anna's fingers brushed against a hard case wedged under some debris. It was the laptop. As she found it, Cal made his move. "When I draw their fire, you run with that case," he ordered. "Get it to the authorities. It's the only way." Before she could protest, he broke cover, firing his rifle and creating a diversion. As gunfire erupted, Anna yanked the laptop free from the mud and ran towards the river. She glanced back to see Cal under heavy fire, setting the debris-choked woods ablaze, creating a wall of smoke and flame. A man blocked her path, but a single impossibly accurate shot from Cal's rifle took him down. Suddenly, police sirens wailed in the distance. The fight was over. Thorne and his men abandoned Miller and fled into the night. In the grey light of dawn, Anna sat with the state police the precious laptop safe. Cal emerged from the smoky woods, wounded but alive. An officer offered her witness protection, a new identity. But looking at Cal and at the battered but resilient town around her, Anna made a choice. "Thank you," she said, her voice firm. "But my name is Anna Petrova. I think I'm going to stay." She hadn't found the life she was promised, but in the heart of the storm, she had found herself. In the end, Anna Petrova didn't find the life she was promised. She found the life she earned, forged in floodwaters and tempered by fire. She came to America, looking for a husband, but found her own strength instead. And Cal Hayes, the man who wanted to be left alone, found that a flicker of the hero he thought he'd buried was still alive. Their story isn't about a knight in shining armor, but about two broken people who in the heart of chaos managed to save each other. If their incredible story of survival and resilience moved you, please show your support. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who loves a powerful story, and be sure to subscribe for more true life dramas. Thank you for watching.